I sat in the back pew of Grace Community Church, clutching a worn envelope with $50 inside. It was all I could spare after paying rent and buying groceries for my daughter and me. Around me, people in expensive suits and designer dresses chatted easily, their offering envelopes thick with cash. Pastor Kenneth Morrison stood at the pulpit, his gold watch glinting under the stage lights. "God blesses those who give generously," he announced, his voice booming through the sanctuary. "When you hold back from God, you hold back your own blessings." I shifted uncomfortably. I was giving what I could, but guilt gnawed at me anyway. Maybe if I gave more, God would help me find a better job than my minimum wage position at the grocery store. After the service, I approached Pastor Morrison during the meet and greet. "Pastor, I wanted to ask for prayer. I'm struggling financially, and I'm worried about making ends meet." He looked at me with what I thought was concern, but then his expression shifted to something that looked almost like contempt. "Struggling? Brother Isaiah, you're sitting in a church, not starving on the street. Maybe if you worked harder instead of complaining, God would reward your efforts." His words hit me like a slap. Around us, other church members pretended not to hear, suddenly very interested in their bulletins. "I work 40 hours a week," I said quietly, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'm doing my best." Pastor Morrison patted my shoulder in a way that felt more dismissive than comforting. "We all struggle, Isaiah. But look around, many of our members started with nothing and now they're blessed. The difference is their faith and work ethic. Perhaps you need to examine where you're falling short." I nodded, too humiliated to respond, and walked away. Behind me, I heard him greet Mrs. Richardson, one of the wealthy members, with genuine warmth. "Sarah. So good to see you. How's that new beach house?" I drove home to my small apartment, Pastor Morrison's words echoing in my mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't working hard enough, wasn't faithful enough, wasn't worthy of help. My daughter Zoe, age 7, looked up from her homework when I entered. "Did you have a good day at church, Daddy?" I forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. How's your homework coming?" That night, after putting Zoe to bed, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing our budget. Between rent, utilities, food, and Zoe's school supplies, there was nothing left. My car needed repairs I couldn't afford. I had no savings. But I kept attending Grace Community because it was the church my late wife had loved. Before cancer took her 2 years ago, we'd been happy members there. Now, I felt like an outsider. 3 months passed with no change in my circumstances. I continued working at the grocery store, continued giving what I could to the church, continued feeling like a failure. Pastor Morrison's sermons about prosperity and blessing felt like personal indictments. One Sunday, he announced a capital campaign. "God has called us to expand. We're building a new worship center, $50 million to glorify His name. I'm asking each of you to pray about your commitment. Remember, you can't outgive God." $50 million. The number was incomprehensible to me. I could barely afford $50. After the service, I noticed Pastor Morrison getting into a brand new Mercedes in the parking lot. His wife wore a fur coat despite the mild weather. Meanwhile, I drove a 15-year-old sedan that rattled ominously. That week, something unexpected happened. My uncle, my late mother's brother whom I'd met only once as a child, passed away. His lawyer called me out of the blue. "Mr. Isaiah Thompson? I'm calling regarding your Uncle Herbert's estate. You're listed as a beneficiary. Can you come to my office this week?" I arranged childcare for Zoe and drove to the lawyer's office, confused but curious. Uncle Herbert had been a recluse, living alone in a small town 3 hours away. Why would he leave me anything? The lawyer, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Rivera, gestured to a chair. "Your uncle left specific instructions. He wanted you to have his estate." "I don't understand," I said. I barely knew him. We met once when I was maybe 6 years old. Ms. Rivera pulled out documents. "Your uncle was a remarkably successful investor. He lived modestly but accumulated significant wealth over 40 years. He had no other family and apparently remembered your mother fondly. He left everything to you. She slid a paper across the desk. The number on it made my vision blur. $12 million. That can't be right, I whispered. It's correct. After estate taxes and legal fees, you'll receive approximately $12 million. Your uncle also left you his home, which is worth another $1 million, and various investment accounts. You're a wealthy man, Mr. Thompson. I sat there in shock, unable to process the words. $12 million. I'd been praying for enough money to fix my car, and suddenly I had more money than I could spend in a lifetime. What do I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. First, I'd suggest finding a good financial advisor. Don't tell anyone until you have a plan. Sudden wealth can bring out the worst in people. She handed me a card. This advisor is trustworthy. Call him. I left the office in a daze, the paperwork in a folder under my arm. In my car, I sat staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand what had just happened. This morning I'd been worried about affording Zoe's school field trip. Now I was a millionaire. I took Ms. Rivera's advice. I told no one, not even Zoe yet. I met with the financial advisor, a serious man named Thomas who helped me set up trusts, investment accounts, and a plan to manage the money wisely. Don't make any major changes immediately, Thomas advised. Keep your current job for now, maintain your lifestyle, and take time to adjust. Sudden wealth changes people, and not always for the better. For 3 months, I continued my routine. I worked at the grocery store, lived in my small apartment, drove my old car. The only difference was the profound sense of security. I could breathe for the first time in years. But I also watched Grace Community Church differently now. I noticed how Pastor Morrison fawned over wealthy members while barely acknowledging poorer ones. I saw how the church spent money on expensive decorations and events while turning away people asking for assistance. One Sunday, a homeless man entered during the service. Pastor Morrison stopped mid-sermon, visibly irritated. Deacons quickly escorted the man out. We have protocols for charity cases, Pastor Morrison said smoothly. This is a worship space, not a shelter. I felt sick watching it. Meanwhile, the capital campaign for the new worship center continued. Pastor Morrison preached every week about giving, about faith, about trusting God with your finances. The irony of a wealthy pastor asking struggling families to sacrifice wasn't lost on me. The campaign had raised $15 million so far, impressive, but far short of the $50 million goal. For months after my inheritance, I made a decision. It was time to reveal my situation, but on my terms. I called a meeting with Thomas and my lawyer. I want to make some donations, but I want to do it strategically. We developed a plan. First, I'd give substantially to organizations actually helping people. Homeless shelters, food banks, programs supporting single parents. I donated $2 million across various charities, all anonymously. Then I bought a house, nothing ostentatious, but a nice 3-bedroom in a good school district for Zoe. I also bought a reliable car and set up Zoe's college fund. Word eventually got around that I'd moved to a nicer neighborhood and bought a new car. At church the following Sunday, people looked at me differently. Curious. Speculative. Pastor Morrison approached me after service. Isaiah, I heard you moved. Did you get a promotion at work? Something like that, I said noncommittally. Wonderful. You see, God rewards faithfulness. I'm so glad you're being blessed. His tone was warmer than it had been in months. I hope you'll prayerfully consider increasing your giving now that you're doing better. I just smiled and walked away. Over the next few weeks, rumors swirled. Someone had seen my house and estimated its value. Someone else noticed my car was new. The church gossip mill worked overtime trying to figure out my situation. Then Pastor Morrison called me directly. Isaiah, I'd love to meet with you. Just to catch up, pray together, celebrate God's blessings in your life. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop. Pastor Morrison arrived at the coffee shop with his practiced smile, wearing an expensive suit, that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. He ordered a specialty latte and got right to business. Isaiah, it's wonderful to see how God has blessed you. You're an inspiration, proof that faithfulness leads to prosperity. I sipped my coffee silently, waiting for his actual purpose. I want to talk to you about the building campaign. We're at a critical juncture. We've raised $17 million, but we need to reach our goal to break ground. God has been laying it on my heart that you might be called to give significantly to this project. How significantly? I asked. He leaned forward. I believe God is calling you to give $1 million. I nearly choke on my coffee. $1 million. I know it sounds like a lot, but Isaiah, think about the impact. Your name could be on the new building, the Thompson Worship Center. What a legacy. What an honor. I set down my coffee carefully. Pastor Morrison, do you remember when I came to you 4 months ago asking for prayer about my struggles? He waved his hand dismissively. That was before God blessed you. Everything changed, didn't it? Actually, I'd already inherited the money by then. I just hadn't told anyone. His expression flickered, confusion, then realization, then something that looked like embarrassment. When I asked for help, you told me to work harder. You implied I was lazy and lacked faith. You dismissed my struggles while wearing a gold watch worth more than my yearly salary. Pastor Morrison's face reddened. Now, Isaiah, I think you're misremembering. I remember perfectly. You treated me with contempt when you thought I was poor. Now that you think I'm wealthy, suddenly I'm faithful and inspired. But I'm the same person I was 4 months ago. The only thing that changed was your perception of my bank account. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry if I came across harshly. Sometimes tough love is necessary. Tough love. I leaned forward. A pastor's job is to shepherd all his flock, not just the wealthy ones. But I've watched you for months now. You greet rich members by name while ignoring the poor ones. You preach about prosperity while turning away people asking for help. That homeless man who came in. Jesus said, whatever we do for the least of these, we do for him. You had him thrown out. Pastor Morrison's jaw tightened. We have protocols. We can't just let anyone. Jesus was homeless. I interrupted quietly. The disciples were fishermen and tax collectors. The early church shared everything with those in need. When did we decide that church was for the comfortable and wealthy? Silence stretched between us. Finally, Pastor Morrison said, Are you refusing to give to the building campaign? I'm refusing to fund a $50 million building when people in our community are hungry and homeless. But I have a different proposal. His eyes lit up with interest. I'm listening. Grace Community Church's operating budget is about $3 million annually, correct? I asked. Approximately, yes. And you're asking for $50 million for a new building. That's almost 17 years' worth of operating budget for a bigger sanctuary. I pulled out a folder. Here's what I propose instead. I'll donate $5 million to the church, but with specific conditions. Pastor Morrison's eyes widened. $5 million was more than he'd expected, but I saw him calculating. It was far less than the $1 million per person he'd hoped to squeeze from wealthy members. What conditions? He asked carefully. I opened the folder. $1 million goes to completely renovate and modernize our current facility. $1 million creates an endowment for a permanent charitable fund to help church members and community members in genuine need. Rent assistance, medical bills, car repairs, whatever people are genuinely struggling with. $1 million funds outreach programs, food pantry, homeless ministry, after-school programs for kids, job training. $1 million goes to missions that actually help people, not just evangelize. And $1 million goes to paying off any church debt and building a healthy reserve fund. Pastor Morrison's expression had shifted from eager to troubled. That's very generous, but Isaiah, we need the new building. Our current sanctuary is too small. Our current sanctuary is half empty most Sundays, I countered. We don't need more space. We need more compassion. The building campaign has been carefully planned, Pastor Morrison said, his voice taking on an edge. The board approved it. Our members have already pledged millions toward this vision. You can't just waltz in and redirect everything.
I'm not redirecting anything. I'm offering a separate donation with specific terms. The building campaign can continue, but I won't contribute to building a palace while ignoring suffering. Pastor Morrison stood abruptly. I'll need to discuss this with the board. This is highly irregular. Take your time, I said calmly. The offer stands for 30 days. After that, I'll donate the $5 million elsewhere. He left without another word, clearly angry. I sat alone in the coffee shop, wondering if I'd just made an enemy of my pastor. That Sunday, the atmosphere at church felt tense. Pastor Morrison preached about Abraham being willing to sacrifice Isaac, drawing parallels to sacrificial giving for the building campaign. He didn't mention my offer, but I felt his pointed looks in my direction. After service, several church members approached me. Apparently, word had leaked about my donation offer. Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman who ran the small food pantry from a church closet, pulled me aside. Is it true? You offered money for real ministry instead of a fancy building. Yes, ma'am. Her eyes filled with tears. Bless you. I've been begging for years for more resources to help people. But the answer is always after the building campaign. Others shared similar stories. Ministry proposals rejected. People in need turned away. Requests for practical help ignored while money poured into architectural plans and fundraising galas. 2 weeks passed with no word from Pastor Morrison or the board. The building campaign continued with increased urgency. Pastor Morrison's sermons became more pointed about false prophets who distract from God's true vision and people who put conditions on their giving. I realized he was talking about me. Then I received a call from Deacon Williams, the board chairman. Isaiah, can you meet with the board Tuesday evening? We'd like to discuss your proposal. The board meeting was held in a conference room I'd never seen before, ornate, with expensive furniture and artwork. The 7 board members sat around a mahogany table, with Pastor Morrison at the head. Deacon Williams gestured to a chair. Isaiah, we've reviewed your proposal. It's generous, but we have concerns. What concerns? I asked. Pastor Morrison spoke up. Your conditions would fundamentally redirect our ministry focus. We're a church of faith and prosperity. Your proposal emphasizes social work and charity, which, while noble, isn't our primary calling. Helping people isn't our calling? I asked. James 2 verse 14 says faith without works is dead. How is building a bigger building while ignoring suffering faithful? One board member, Mr. Hudson, leaned forward. Young man, we appreciate your generosity, but you've been a member here for 3 years? Some of us have built this church over decades. We know what's needed. What's needed is compassion, I said quietly. I've watched people struggle and ask for help, only to be turned away or judged. Meanwhile, we're raising $50 million for a building that will sit half empty like our current one. Our projections show growth, Pastor Morrison said smoothly. The new facility will attract more members, more families. More wealthy families, I interrupted. That's what you mean, isn't it? You want a building impressive enough to attract rich members who give big donations. But what about the people Jesus actually ministered to? The poor, the broken, the struggling? Deacon Williams sighed. Isaiah, we appreciate your passion, but the board has decided we cannot accept your donation with those conditions. If you'd like to give to the building campaign without restrictions, we'd be grateful. Otherwise, we'll respectfully decline. I stood up. Then I respectfully declined to donate. But I want you to know something. I'm not just some newly wealthy person looking to control things. I've been part of this church during my poorest, most difficult days. And when I needed support, I was mocked and dismissed. Now that you think I have money, suddenly I'm welcomed and courted. That's not Christianity. That's corruption. I walked out, leaving them in uncomfortable silence. The next day, I made a decision. I called Ms. Chun and several other members who'd shared their frustration about the church's priorities. How would you feel about starting something new? I asked. A church focused on actually helping people, not building monuments? Ms. Chun was quiet for a moment. Are you serious? Completely. I can fund it for the first few years, while we build naturally. Small space, no fancy buildings, just genuine ministry to people in need. Within a week, 15 families had committed to joining. We rented a modest storefront and called it Open Door Fellowship. Our first service at Open Door Fellowship was held on a Sunday morning with 23 people in attendance. We sat in folding chairs, sang with a single guitar, and I gave a simple message about Jesus, welcoming everyone, regardless of their social status or bank account. Afterward, we served a community meal. Anyone was welcome, free of charge. 30 people showed up for lunch, including several homeless individuals from nearby streets. Mrs. Chun ran the meal with the efficiency she'd never been allowed to at Grace Community. "This is what church should be," she said, tears in her eyes. Word spread quickly. Within a month, we were averaging 50 people on Sundays and serving over 100 meals weekly. I donated money to fund the programs without fanfare or recognition. We helped people with rent, bought groceries for struggling families, paid medical bills, fixed cars. Real help for real needs. Meanwhile, Grace Community Church struggled. Several families had left with us. Others, disillusioned by the board's rejection of practical ministry, found churches elsewhere. Attendance dropped. Donations to the building campaign stalled at 19 million. Impressive, but nowhere near the 50 million goal. Pastor Morrison called me 3 months after I'd left. "Isaiah, we need to talk." I agreed to meet him at the same coffee shop as before. He looked different, tired, stressed, older somehow. "The church is struggling," he admitted without preamble. "We've lost donors, attendance is down, and the building campaign has stalled. The board is considering abandoning it entirely." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "I've been doing some reflecting," Pastor Morrison continued, his voice strained. "About what you said, about how we treated people, about priorities, about everything." He looked down at his hands. "You were right. I got caught up in appearances, in impressing wealthy members, in building something grand. I forgot about actually ministering to people." I waited, sensing there was more. "Your offer, the 5 million with conditions, is it still available?" I shook my head. "No, I've committed that money elsewhere, to Open Door Fellowship and other ministries actually helping people." His face fell. "I understand. I don't suppose there's any way." "However," I interrupted, "I have a different proposal. Grace Community has good bones. The facility is solid. The location is excellent. What if, instead of a building campaign, we transformed it into a real community center? Food pantry, job training, counseling services, homeless outreach, the works." Pastor Morrison looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "What would that require?" "It would require humility. Admitting the building campaign was about ego, not ministry. Refocusing the entire church on serving people, especially the struggling and poor. And it would require you stepping back from pastoral duties to focus on fundraising and administration while someone else leads spiritual direction." I could see him struggling with this. His entire identity was wrapped up in being Pastor Morrison, the leader of a thriving church. "Who would lead spiritually?" he asked carefully. "A team of people who understand suffering. Mrs. Chun, Deacon Williams, if he's willing to change his perspective, and a few others. Not one voice dictating vision, but many voices ensuring we stay focused on actual ministry." Pastor Morrison was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "And would you come back?" "I'll support the ministry financially, but I'm staying at Open Door Fellowship. That's where God has called me now." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that. I pushed away the very people I should have been serving." He looked at me directly. "I'm truly sorry, Isaiah, for how I treated you, for dismissing your struggles, for valuing money over people. You tried to show me what really mattered, and I was too proud to listen." For the first time, his apology felt genuine, born from real reflection and humility, not just desperation. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. Over the next 6 months, Grace Community Church transformed. They abandoned the building campaign and restructured entirely. They opened a food pantry, a job training center, and a homeless outreach program. Attendance slowly rebuilt, not with wealthy members seeking a prosperity gospel, but with people genuinely wanting to serve their community. I donated $3 million to support the transformation, but anonymously. It wasn't about recognition. It was about enabling real ministry. Open Door Fellowship continued growing too. We moved to a larger space and launched satellite ministries in 3 neighboring communities. I funded the expansion but kept my involvement quiet. The church wasn't about me. It was about serving people. 1 year after that first meeting in the coffee shop, I attended a joint service with both churches, Grace Community and Open Door Fellowship, coming together for a day of service. We served meals to 500 people, provided free medical screenings, offered job counseling, and just loved people without judgment or condition. Standing in the middle of it all, watching volunteers from both churches working side by side, I felt profound gratitude. Not for the money, though it enabled much good, but for the journey that had taught me what truly mattered. Pastor Morrison approached me during cleanup. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved this church by refusing to enable its worst instincts." I shook his hand. "You saved it by being willing to change. That takes more courage than people realize." The pastor who had mocked my struggles had learned the same lesson I had, that wealth means nothing if it's not used to lift others up, that success is meaningless without compassion, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is the refusal to enable destructive behavior. My inheritance hadn't just changed my life. It had transformed 2 churches, helped thousands of people, and taught me that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in lives touched, hope restored, and communities transformed. And that, I realized, was a legacy worth far more than any building could ever be.